Yeah, I think that's good enough, especially because I have some protocolar things to go through that will take a while, couple minutes, and that will give more people time to arrive. So welcome everyone to the first activity of the Museums Without Walls online seminar. Museums Without Walls is an ongoing exploration of virtual art institutions and communities, currently supported by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, Queen's University, Screen Cultures and Curatorial Studies Program, and the Agnes Charrington Arts Center. For this stage of the project, Museum Without Walls has been physically hosted at Queen's University, and it's worth remembering that Queen's University, just like so many museums across the world, is situated on unceded land, the ancestral home of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. Last week, we had a really amazing conference and exhibition here at the Isabel Bader Center in the city of Kingston. And the conference program will be continuing, will be in some ways extended for the next 6 weeks as an online seminar, which takes place every Thursday at 2 p.m. EST, so exactly at this time. And you can find links for all the encounters on our website and social media, museusemparedes.com or at museusemparedes on Instagram. And yeah, for most of these encounters, we'll be sharing a number of video presentations in advance, and we'll be using the time of the seminar to discuss. But for today, the activity will be a little bit different. We'll have presentations live, followed by discussions. And the theme that we'll be addressing today is Para-Academia, Post-disciplinary Communities and Networked Scholarship, which intends to bring to the fore the ever-changing configuration in institutions and communities of knowledge reproduction. And of course, it is an opportunity to debate the crisis in our conventional models, especially the university. And with us today, we have representatives of two of the most prominent and vibrant of such communities of new para-academic network institutions in the Northern Hemisphere, Mohammad Salemy, who is the co-founding organizer of the new Center for Research and Practice, and Abbey Pusz and Margo Bergamini, who are co-directors of Do Not Research. I'm really excited about everyone here. It's probably the talk that I've been most looking forward in the whole activities so far. I'll be introducing the guests in order, and they will be doing the presentations, and then we'll follow up with Q&A and discussion. But of course, if you want to comment anything on the chat, be welcome to do it as well. And we'll be starting with Mohammad. Mohammad Salemy is an independent Berlin-based artist, critic, and curator from Canada. He holds a BFA from Emily Carr University and an MA in Critical Curatorial Studies from the University of British Columbia. He has shown his works in Ashkal Owen's Homeworks 7, Vit the Wit, and Robot Love. His writings have been published in Efflux, Flash Art, Third Rail, Brooklyn Rail, Ocula, Arts of the Working Class, and Spike. Salemy's curatorial experiment for machine use only was included in the 11th edition of Gwangju Biennale. Together with the changing cast, he forms the artist collective Alphabet Collection. Salemy is the organizer of the new Center for Research and Practice. He has been the co-founding organizer of the new center since 2014. Mohammad, welcome.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me to meet a bunch of brand new people. I'm meeting someone whose last name is Bjork. I mean, that is incredible. I really want to pay respect to Aaron here because, it's amazing. I mean, the guy's last name is Bjork. I mean, come on. Anyways, so hello. Are you in Iceland? No.
No, I'm in Los Angeles.
Man, Bjork's new album is gonna shake the world, but let's not talk about that. Anyways, so I just want to basically, how much time do I have?
20 minutes.
Hey Siri, set up a timer for 20 minutes.
20 minutes, counting down.
Okay, yeah, because you know what I mean? Time is like space, and you have to respect that. And, I can get deep into that. And I can look at this and know how I'm sort of dividing what I'm going to talk about, because I can talk 16 hours, but that's not good. Okay, so let's just, Okay, so, the idea of a para-academic was always part of my sort of like undergrad, because I learned about University of Mori. I don't know if you guys know about University of Mori or not, but it was a fictional university that Walter Benjamin created with his best friend, colleague, Kabbalist, Gershom Scholem in the 20s. No, actually 20s. Yeah. And they called it Mori University. It was supposed to be in Switzerland. And it was sort of like this parody of academia. And the stuff they did was really, really cool, because they would come up with like really crazy name of seminars, and like they would close the school, open it up, change its director and all that. It was basically a critique of academia, right? But it was always in the back of my head that like it's possible to do something, an alternative university is something outside of university, but not necessarily to make fun of academia, but actually to produce knowledge. Now, none of this would have been possible without the support of Canada Council. Now, because you talked about SHREC, right? Because this whole project is supported by SHREC, right? So Canada Council is similar to SHREC. SHREC is a Canadian institution that provides funding to academics, and Canada Council provides funding to curators and artists. So in 2012, I just finished my curatorial studies at University of British Columbia, and I basically applied for a big grant, Canada Council, and my idea was to sort of like create a network out of all the Iranian knowledge producers outside of Iran in the diaspora. They really liked it, and I began working on that. But actually, I kind of realized that given the political issues in Iran, Iranian scholars that were scattered in different universities around the world were not interested in sort of like putting their research and name and stuff forward, because they all want to go in and out. And so basically, even though the project was initiated as that, I sort of like contacted Canada Council and I said, I'm changing it. And then they supported me for 2 more years. So this really the foundational, like, the money, without this money, this school would have not been created, because not that the funding went into school, but the funding allowed me 2.5 years of thinking and meeting. And so I immediately moved to New York and I started networking with a lot of people. And my idea was like, if we're going to do a new like educational institution, it ought to bring into discussion topics that are not discussed already or exhausted by existing university. And as a critic of sort of like the post-structuralist paradigm, from the day it arrived, I was in undergrad 1990s in Emily Carr, and I remember I read the first chapter of History of Sexuality, and I was interested in it, but at the same time, I had a problem with the whole philosophical premise of Foucault, the way he was setting it up, sexuality as discourse. And so I've been always sort of like looking myself as someone who look inside the contribution of post-structuralist thinkers, but try to bring things out of it and still not call myself a post-structuralist and not sign up to its premise, like main epistemological premises, right? So, and then through that 3 years of research, I stumbled upon Reza Negarestani and Ray Brassier and a bunch of other philosophers and thinkers who were working around 2 different projects. One was how to reinterpret a different kind of left after the financial breakdown of 2008. And then the other one was, can there be a form of feminism outside of the post-structuralist frame set up for the feminist discourses, right? And these 2 communities were kind of like related both in terms of family relationships, but also in terms of ideas. And so basically, in the output for that 3 year of research was this conference I organized in Vancouver in 2014 called Incredible Machines Conference. And we used Google Hangout to bring in a lot of people from different parts of the world to give presentations, because we couldn't invite everybody. The budget I had was not that big, but I wanted a lot of people to be part of it. So we used Google Hangout, and we had about 500-600 people in the room in Vancouver, and we had 500-600 people online watching. And it was a great success. And I thought, with 2 colleagues that helped me set that up, I said, let's just try to make an ongoing platform that is not like event-based, and provide room mostly for people around the scene of the accelerationism, and the feminist friends who were working on their ideas, but also sort of like young and new scholars who are coming out of university. Usually it takes 10 years for you to basically teach your own stuff, right? And I was like, I want to work with PhD grads like curators work with emerging artists. I want to contact them. I want to like get to know them a year or two before they're finishing, and then get to know what they're writing about, and basically read their chapters, maybe give them feedback. And then when they're ready, they should teach for us before they even get a teaching job. And this really like combining the core of people that I was interested in their ideas, plus new thinkers, young new thinkers coming out of different PhD programs or out of publishing industry where people had great manuscripts and ideas for books. That basically constituted the core of the instructors for the new center. And I was the curator of education. Jason was the student person. And then Tony was the tech guy who basically set up the platform. And the main thing for me was that when the Accelerate Manifesto came out in 2013, there was a lot of comments on like how much of it is accurate. You know, people as important as Mackenzie Ward and Tony Negri commented on it about what's good about it and what's not good about it. And my approach was like, why don't we verify it, not through reflection and critique, but through its execution? Let's just take some of the stuff that it says and put it into practice and see if it works. If it works, that means this is a valid manifesto, rather than sitting and thinking about semantics and what these words mean. So the main idea of Accelerate Manifesto was that a post-capitalist world is only possible if we salvage what is good already built into capitalism from the time of social democracy and basic even market economy. And it's impossible to build a brand new world because we've already exhausted resources on the earth. So just like buying secondhand clothes, just like going to dumpster diving, capitalism is falling apart, and there are parts that we can reconnect and rebuild a post-capitalist world. That idea was really the engine of New Center, because I thought already there are things outside in the online and offline, and we can just salvage and connect them together and create a school out of that. And really, we thought, okay, our website should be WordPress, our marketing should be Facebook and Twitter, later Instagram, and Google should be our document and classroom holder. And because Google showed interest, we became kind of like they consider us like a nonprofit school. So we were able to get a really good deal from Google and be able to offer Google, like unlimited Google Drive to our students and our instructors. And basically we build a new center with so little actual funding and resources, but just by putting our network of physical thing, those people in that university are interested, let's work with them. Oh, those people in that university, they're not interested, let's just avoid them. So we brought together parts of the digital world and parts of the real world and kind of build a new center on this with really efficient economically, right? And a week before we go online, I was like, okay, one of our other principle was like, we're not going to get funding. We don't want money from anyone because it's going to like tie us down to certain political interests of foundations, governments. We should try to fund it on its own, independently fund it. And a week before going online, I realized that for this to work, we need to, besides students, we need to have a membership system. And I just thought of us as sort of like, my idea was like, imagine if we can do Netflix for knowledge. So basically record all these seminars and archive them in an organized manner so people can watch these seminars afterwards as if they're sitting in the back of the class auditing classes in like graduate setting, right? And because of the membership, we survived, because it takes time for people to want to actually put $200, $300, $400 into studying 4 or 8 sessions with someone. But the membership was like somewhat that a lot of people who were excited about what we were doing started supporting. And we immediately started to be able to pay all of our instructors, pay ourselves a little money, and kind of like keep it going. And now it's like it's in ninth year of operation. We're still independently funded. And we're still basically working, I'm curating on the same principle. My two colleagues left. One left to pursue independent music making, Jaden, and Tony left to pursue a PhD in philosophy at University of Buffalo, and he's just finishing this year. And I just continued on and became the sole organizer of the news center. We used to be three of us. And in 2015, we started a triple ampersand, our publishing arm, which does a online publishing every week, but also we've done few books. We published the Loser's first book, which never was published in English. We translated and published that as a PDF. It's a free download, you can get it. We published a book for that project I did in Guangzhou in 2016 called For Machine Use Only. And we just published Logiciel, which we're going to launch it this week in Berlin by A.A. Kavya. Lovely cover by Toba Orbach. I don't know if you know Toba or not, but I love her work, and she allowed us to use her work for free on the cover. So yeah, so let me just look at my notes and see what are the, yeah, so basically, and in the first semester, our collective laborious Kabonic were able to do in our first semester, they workshopped the Xenofeminist Manifesto. And that summer, there was a big conference in Hockey in Berlin where they gathered and kind of worked on it later, and then into early spring, the Xenofeminist Manifesto came out, which is sort of like this complementary document to Accelerate Manifesto. And yeah, so I'm kind of like proud of what we've achieved. We were, you know, maybe this is different from what you doing, Abbey and Margo. We were not interested in sort of like avant-garde new ways of pedagogy, because for someone like me, I was just talking about some people. I like dead people. I like old systems, right? A lot of great knowledge, even by people we admire, were produced with just Oxbridge methodology, right? Like basically writing every week, presenting, and rigorously reading a lot, right? And our idea was to how can we amend or bring the Oxbridge method into online and kind of like get the younger generation who doesn't like to read a lot, doesn't like to write a lot, kind of interested, and get them more interested in this deeper kind of like engagement with knowledge that is sort of like not so much like this way, like Instagram, or this way, like, I don't know, what I mean, like sometimes we're flipping horizontally, sometimes we're flipping vertically, right? And the only amendment we've made to that is basically working on the concept that like knowledge is performative. So, and universities do not really teach students, even in the grad level, they're not make them aware of the fact that a lot of time you're performing knowledge in real time. Like right now I'm doing it. So we basically said you can do your presentations as video. You can maybe write your longer essay, do a 40-minute talk, because you have to learn how to compel people to focus and listen to you, right? So this has been, if we've done any kind of like avant-garde pedagogy, it's sort of like allowing younger people to basically use different ways of demonstrating their produced knowledge, mostly through this type of like performing it on video, performing it in time-based media, right? And so that's one thing. The other thing that it came up earlier was like the notion of transdisciplinarity, and how basically our philosophy program is interested neither in continental philosophy nor in analytic philosophy, but in ways in which we can connect the two and bring and create a new type of philosophy that basically has shed these two prisons. So that's one thing. And then in terms of our curatorial program, art and curatorial program, it's about a rigorous critique of existing contemporary art, both on the market or the finance market of art, and also knowledge market of art, which is the curatorial, biennale, and the hype cycle, right? And is it possible to kind of like create a kind of like art with its discourses that is neither interested in the sort of like academic art speak with this jargon that changes every few years, or in a market which is basically celebrates like, I don't know, geniusness and formalism, right? Like really. And so that's our art and curatorial. And our post-planetary design is basically a speculative design program where we get our students to think about technologies that might be needed in the future, or technologies that we need today, but they don't exist, but we have the means to at least imagine them before we have the funding or political will, or actually like actual technical like ability to build these technologies, right? And that program, actually, Ed used to run it for New School in New York. And then when he quit New School, I basically said, why don't you just rename it and bring it to New Center? Because this idea that like we need to think about technology. Like imagine if science, I call it like science nonfiction, right? So like science fiction, but science nonfiction. So you're thinking of technologies in the way that you see them in science fiction, but they're actually for purposes that are real concerns of today or the future. And then our transdisciplinary studies program is a place where you learn how to basically think and write about this type of cacophony of knowledges that are so hard to say, is this physics or is it chemistry? Is it earth studies? Is it environmental studies? Is it actually politics? You're just talking about climate change. Climate change is a political issue, right? Basically saying like, who cares? Let's just learn how to write well and how to bring references from different sources, even though these references don't come from like already related disciplines, and mix them together and throw some poetry in and throw some physics in, and maybe you're able to come up with something that is compelling enough. So these are our 4 programs. Why am my batteries running out? I didn't even disconnect this. If this goes down, I have to like reconnect, right? How many? I don't know. Let me look at my timer. How are we doing with time? Because I don't have my timer open.
Oh, I was trusting Sari, but I guess it's about time, Mohammed.
Yeah, totally. That's what I thought too. Okay. So I have 2 more minutes. So basically, and I think one thing that I want to say this, because I think this is the most controversial thing I'm going to say. We were just talking about earlier. One decision we made quite earlier. Why is this not working? If I run out of battery, it's going to die. Jesus Christ. If I die, I'm going to come back with my phone, okay? Was to basically not engage this paradigm of the woke politics of academia. We kind of like stay out of it. We're not anti-woke. We're not pro-woke. We're kind of like outside of it. We're not anti-cancel culture. We're not pro-cancel culture. We think we're agnostic. We think some people deserve to be canceled. Some people don't. So, and this has been a very important thing, because I feel that the younger generation is basically, even though has learned from this political battles, struggles of the last 20 years, but they're ready to transcend into something above it. And universities are just too caught in this politics to offer it. So that has been a very sort of like lucrative or attractive thing for younger, smart generation to come out. They think they can complement what they're studying at university with what we offer. Most of our students already are in PhD programs or master programs or strive to be in PhD programs. So they think, okay, I'm going to be able to get something out of New Center that is not on the curriculum, is not on the syllabus of these seminars I'm taking. And we don't ask them to agree with everything they hear. And the proximity of the internet, the fact that they're sitting far, allows people to be much more sort of like adversarial to professors, question them, basically say, no, I don't agree with you, because you know what I mean? When you're in a room with a powerful person, you don't feel like challenging them. But when you're in a screen, I think it creates this distance that actually allows our students to be critical of the instructors And so these are the things I wanted to bring up to you, and my time is over. So what I'm going to do is, if it goes down, I'll just come back with my phone until I figure out why my laptop is not charging.
Well, I
Thank you
hope that
for
the
listening to my
laptop will
presentation.
charge.
Pardon me?
Oh, thank you. No, I hope that the laptop will stay alive
No,
for
no,
the rest of the talk.
Yeah, no, I have an extra charger too, so I'll fix it somehow. But you guys go ahead. I'm listening.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. So I guess we'll pass on to Margo and Abbey. Margo Bergamini is a writer interested in cultural currents critical of modernity. She researches online reactionary subcultures like the alt-right and its various competing present-day successors, all of which are themselves distinctly modern. Her essays investigate these groups and others' autodidactic efforts, and how these efforts express a desire for beauty and refinement that neither platforms nor contemporary institutes can satisfy. Margo is co-director of Do Not Research, and Abbey is an artist and writer interested in cultural currents, particular to the left, its present disorientation, and the obstacles, therefore, to creative expression. Drawing from her experience as a digital native, and early exposure to web-based communities, the work takes up the tools and visual vocabularies of the internet with an eye towards the extremely online. She's co-director of the publishing platform Do Not Research, along with creating video art, sculptural objects, and writing. She's based in New York. Margo and Abbey, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having us. I'm just going to share a PowerPoint or a Google Slides that's going to accompany some of the things we say. I wouldn't say it's exactly essential to see if you're listening to this like a podcast, but it's kind of has good supplemental images. Okay. All right, so I'm going to give a quick sort of rundown of how I came to the project. Abby's going to give a quick history of the project, and then we're going to talk about some of the really essential works of research and our kind of research-based art that are very important to our project, maybe exemplify some of our relationships towards, like research and also towards like pedagogy and things like that. So I'll just get started in the interest of time. So I started to use the internet habitually in 2011. My parents bought me an iPod Touch when I graduated elementary school and never thought to monitor my internet usage. So I was probably on about 10 hours a day instantly. And as a very bored, insecure feeling child, I began to condense my inmost anxieties into Google searches. And this was back in 2011. Google was still sort of spitting out the actual most popular results. So everything you searched basically brought you to strange internet forums, video game forums, and bodybuilding forums. You can kind of imagine these sort of answers that I got to these questions. At first I was only looking at sort of entertaining things, but as I sort of began to explore more, I began to encounter quite a bit more political content. And at first, all this content seemed very odd to me. And I don't think it was as common back then. It didn't have the same fervor. There was, of course, politics boards, and as a kind of 4chan user at the time, there was Poll, but these things were a bit less serious. You didn't have to worry so much about fascist dog whistles and internet culture. Things were relatively contained. And, there was sort of websites that we think of as very politicized now, like 4chan and Tumblr, being sort of respectively a right-wing and left-wing website, where, in close communication, people would kind of jokingly ship them, imagine that their anthropomorphized counterparts are like in a relationship. So it was a relatively more chill time in the internet, but obviously things began to pick up and, we began to see far more political content. Things changed very quickly. People suddenly began to, talk about character designs in video games and say things like feminism has gone too far. People started to invade, transgender forums to call trans people degenerate epsilers, and they began to talk about how they were the reason, the West was being destroyed and overrun by immigrants. Men on bodybuilding forums began to say that, getting fit and lifting was somehow a way to protect, like a dying culture and a dying civilization. I didn't have any idea why this was happening. it would be a few years before it became quite so common, in regular culture to complain about things like climate anxiety and, terrors about like, increasing social downward mobility and things like that. And I suspect very few of the people I was talking to could really say why they felt anxious, because I also suspect that most of these people were incredibly young. This is one of the graphs here just shows from one of Joshua Cittarella's bits of research, these sort of, average ages of the very influential Instagram political accounts. And as you can see, most of them were anywhere between the ages of 13 and 15, which is the age I was. And I think I'm right to expect that on the other websites, these people were young too, that these were kids. And, the landscape has changed in recent years. But for as long as the internet has had any effect on culture wars, young people, mid-teens and younger, have constituted both the avant-garde and the rank and file. And, for most of my time online then, I belonged to the latter group, that of a foot soldier and audience member. I was 15 and sort of like watching Gamergate happen, leaving crude comments and having small conversations as these things became, like national news stories. And just a few years after that, somehow I was on obscure leftist forums talking to anarchists and communists about organizing strategy, and also talking about like online propaganda strategy, talking about how to draw young men away from the alt-right and things like that. And then a year after that, I was, at the dinner table with my parents after the deplorable speech from Hillary Clinton, having to explain to my parents, what the alt-right was, what Pepe was, and things like that. So I was already kind of acting as like a liaison to broader parts of the culture describing these things. But soon after that, after Trump kind of rose and I saw what the alt-right did, I became kind of disillusioned just paying attention to online politics. It seemed like it fed into something violent, but also to something that didn't even really affect the people who charged it. None of the NEETs and basement dwellers really had any better lives after Trump was elected. After that point, I got very interested in art, but the political charge of art brought me back to a lot of these questions and discussions just as quickly. So, in summation of all that, part of the DNR project is a recognition that artists in the 21st century, all of us are content producers. And obviously the ubiquity of social media platforms has made content producers of everyone. Everyone's an influencer. But it's our hope that artists and other similarly critical and rigorous types like critics and researchers can be especially rigorous influencers, untethered from the mainstream's news cycles and its easy dogmatisms. That hope isn't totalizing. We also want artists to be artists first, not to be explicitly like social media influencers or anything like that. And we also know firsthand how exhausting, kind of marginal internet communities can be, especially in a time when the left in many places is very weak and non-existent in others. On top of that, kind of from the vantage of 2020, it's easy to see that there are these sort of online flashpoints, things flash up and they seem like moments we can kind of exploit, and then they sort of simmer down. I mean, these are sort of a few examples of sort of moments online that have kind of fallen apart, or, kind of moved on in sort of quieter ways. The stakes are really high, it always seems, but, the pieces can be wiped off the board at random. And on top of that, we aren't content with covertly influencing others just from the shadows. We live on the internet by our proclivity and circumstance, and our art reflects on this. It makes a kind of life visible, maybe makes that kind of life visible to the people who are also living it. There's no telling what follows this awareness, but I know that in the case of people brought together by Joshua Cittarella's art, it led to a totally new community. So while we came together through the memeing of this or that book or take, have come to know each other as artists and students and teachers, our meme page and Josh's streams are still sort of central home for the community. And for many of our viewers and fans and readers, that's most of what we are. But by fully living in this strangely public culture war, we forge relationships and moreover formulate theories and produce artworks that can kind of transcribe and understand the boundaries of this effort, and hopefully, make it more than a covert effort, but also something we can like learn from and discuss, maybe to inform other parts of political practice and theory. And we want to do that because we want a lot more than this. Our project exists because institutions, the art world, and universities and museums and galleries are failing a lot of the people they're supposed to serve. And although we dislike the institutions as they are now, slow and enamored with repetition, bent on amplifying the same vague liberal complaints and tired gestures for decades, We're fighting for a day in which discretion and curation can one day return to the benefit of artists. And that's one thing we seek to do with our publishing platform and some of our, in real life events like our gallery show. All right, moving on to Abbey.
Hey everyone. So September 2020, artist and researcher Joshua Citarella releases his syllabus through his Patreon. By that time, a small group had assembled watching his Monday night Twitch streams where he broadcast his research practice. In September, we held our first reading group. For many of us, we had already read Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism. This was really an excuse to see each other's faces in a time of deep quarantine and to start building up the community. Following that first meeting, Margo and I became fully immersed in leading the discussions and organizing the community. My undergrad education was falling apart and I was cruising through Zoom school, splitting my time instead between my studio practice and preparing for the reading group. Between this and Joshua Citarella's Twitch stream lectures, the community quickly established itself as a peer-to-peer school for artists. The books we read opened up our political imagination and offered a name to something that I always felt and never could articulate, a sense of capitalist realism. This term is defined by a sense of defeat and inability to imagine a coherent alternative to capitalism. Books like The People's Republic of Walmart gave us a crash course in central planning, revealing for the first time to many of us the 1970s Chilean Project Cybersyn. Putting aside US intervention and the assassination of Allende, Cybersyn was far ahead of what was materially available when it imagined a world where workers own the means of production via computational power. This vision of the future has never caught on the left, but we were inspired. I want to pause on this because in a moment of institutional decline, it was hard to read this book without wanting to quit everything and become a logician. The left is dead. And if it were to come back, it would take the massive coordination of scientists and mathematicians. Why be an artist? And if you do make art, where does it even go? The art world that young students are being trained for simply does not exist. My undergraduate program sensed this, pivoting to produce artists as social workers. These artists use their flexibility to act as mediators and fundraisers, providing the care otherwise left blank by the state. And institutions that should be cultivating the visual language of today are absent, their fingers in their ears, as writer and critic Mike Pepe asks over and over again if a museum is a database. That is merely a database, a catalog of art objects lacking any robust curatorial voice. Much of the capital A art of our time is shy to be itself, subordinated to charity efforts or endless technical novelty. Artists find themselves in alliance with platforms to popularize and grant visibility, and their status as content creators seems a dig at what art could truly be. Platforms are not institutions, their curation not tied to stewardship or any centuries-long conversation of what constitutes a creative work. And in the world of new media, there is a deep suspicion of any formal training of art. That artistic traditions of the past have anything to offer us is called into question, for the world is so bombarded by images and constant technological innovation. Timelines of influence are lost in the noise to signal ratio. This attitude ultimately sides with the weakening of curation and the every man for himself mode of digital art production that makes for a landscape where art cannot seem to house or give context to any of what it produces. I wanted to see if we could talk about what we had learned, and I wanted to do it as artists. It was with this thought that Do Not Research as a publishing platform was kicked off. By February, we were reading Inventing the Future, a book by Nick Zernicek and Alex Williams. I wanted to metabolize it in some way, so I produced a short video for Do Not Research that could be stuck onto an Instagram feed. Margo's gonna play it. It's about a minute long.
Oh, America, you are so grand and golden. I wish I was on the next flight to America. army, what an air force, what a marines. America, I never served my country. America, America. Afghanistan, Vietnam, Iran, Native America, America.
Yeah, so just a quick recap. This is part of my art practice, and it's informed by the work that we were doing together as a book club and the community, and our presence as like meme posters. And so this, among other videos, was really like something that could kind of be in the language and vernacular of TikTok, be catchy, and also have this political edge. So this was produced right after
America,
right after Jan 6, so that was the top of my mind.
you are so grand.
And so come the summer, the community was producing a lot, and DNR became the place to draw all of our energy into one. It was also a turning point for what this thing could be, that it wasn't quite a magazine or a school. When we talk about it as a para-institutional space, it is not because we believe that these problems can only be answered by a fringe community, as the direct action-focused art collectives competing for the Turner Prize would lead us to believe. It is no replacement for strength and social democracy. Talking to friend and podcaster, Nate Sloan, he reminded me that the goal isn't just to disrupt, rather that we must disrupt in order to end the disruption that is neoliberal capitalism, the slow dismantling of social programs, and a shift into mass privatization. So with all of that, I think it's a good time to turn to some of the works and art that are produced by this community, starting with Flip Caustic. And really, this is where you see art and internet culture research merging. This is Flip Caustic's PC Bed, a sculpture and endurance-based performance piece, spoken with the voice of a true digital native and not an anthropologist. I love this work because he loves his computers as much as he is suspicious of the blurred line between good screen, bad screen, and wage slave work. Yes, we love Flip. These are some stills. So what we showed is the bed as a sculpture, and then this is what the performance looked like. It was broadcast over Twitch. We're going to skip ahead to Harris for the sake of time.
Hey
guys.
So Harris is a sculptor, a so-called craft accelerationist. He just got his master's in ceramics. Formerly part of the quote-unquote goopy ceramics encampment, he takes his interest in craft and technique to observations of online culture. The detritus of the internet is camped in our everyday experience. Novel as a bong you crush and improvise out of a plastic water bottle. Yes, thank you. And then these are some of his 3D printed objects. He's taking like this kind of thought, like possible future person, an ascended NEET, not an education or training person. And so he's trying to imagine like a future person that is like, has a devout sort of sense beyond the kind of capitalist condition of now, like a kind of spiritual redemption for that kind of basement dweller person. And that's what's being communicated in these sculptures.
Moving on, we're going to quickly go over a few more. This is Jack Ricker, artist and researcher who's here, by the way. These are sort of like charts, kind of graphs, kind of models, kind of metaphors from a piece that was both text and image that will be published on the blog. We don't have time to go over them. Sorry, Jack, who's here. But one of these that's in both the bottom left and top right corners is the kind of conspiracy corkscrew. So it shows your political compass, which just shows like kind of 4 quadrants. It's a very silly rendering of like how actually people can hold ideologies, but it's immensely popular on the internet. And part of what it shows is just how, as you know, narratives travel and as things become more conspiratorial and disconnected from any kind of mainstream, you know, it brings people of varying sort of political ideologies together in kind of confounding and unexpected ways. You know, we see this a lot in, you know, a lot of mass movements and a lot of conspiratorial movements, all the way from, you know, like libertarians sort of participating in Occupy to like, you know, new age spiritualist people participating in QAnon and the insurrection at the Capitol and things like that. Moving on, we have an essay and kind of like survey of this one online trend by writer Holly about sort of this Twitter controversy that emerged around Oatly milk and the kind of like reactionary backlash against it. Just to keep it brief, there is like a strong current among online reactionaries who are very against sort of like artificial milks and also kind of seed oils in general, because they're this industrial byproduct that they believe you know, like weakens people, makes them, you know, kind of compliant, feminizes them and things like that. And I think the piece does a very good job through like the sheer volume of screenshots and quotes and things like that from even private accounts that she's been sort of secretly following. At once how ridiculous a lot of this is, but also how there are some like genuine and probably, you know, useful to engage with feelings about like bodily autonomy, pollution, you know, kind of climate anxiety that do exist even within these very fringe, generally odious kind of political spaces. This is one other piece that we published on our website. It was also republished by The Guardian by Joshua Citarella. It was sort of investigating, you know, describing and prescribing a kind of mimetic tactic Josh called the slow red pill, in which, to keep it brief, you know, like a secretly radical person will sort of run a more moderate meme account and slowly steep the audience in more, you know, radical content until they've been kind of like introduced to it without really knowing. You know, importantly, this is like a technique exploited by the right that the left hasn't really engaged with. So the point of the piece is to kind of describe it and then say maybe such a thing should be done on our side. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over this as well, unfortunately, and yeah, and just say that sorry, 1 second. You know, that while all this research informs the art practice of our community, it also serves as an early detection of emergent trends that have the possibility to become political currents the left should engage with. You know, many of these, as we've kind of encountered, have emerged on the right and are generally, people tend to avoid them. You know, the left has kind of seeded the conversation around many of these things, you know, fearing blowback. So censorship in the mainstream is met with institutional rot, which is met with the humanities kind of under crisis. So seemingly there's no coherent way forward. And so facing this impasse, Do Not Research takes a full dive into these things and, you know, various artistic and research-based ways in order to sort of make the expressions and desires of the very online and their kind of unique and strange political identities visible, in the hopes that these things can be kind of repurposed and maybe transformed. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Margo and Abbey. It was a really great overview of all the work that Do Not Research has been doing. We have some time for discussion now, so if anyone wants to pop up a question, well, there's Mohammad. Anyone else, please just raise your hands. We'll be trying to coordinate it. But yeah, we can start with Mohammad.
Yeah, I'm ignorant to not have been aware of you until recently, so I apologize for that. It seems like you are doing very great work, and there's so much overlap. You know, like Mark was an inspiration for the New Center. He was supposed to teach for us in the year that he committed suicide. Nick Cernicek, these people are like friends and colleagues who taught early seminars for us. Benjamin Bratton, the stack, like the Incredible Machines conference began with the first draft of the stack called Black Stack, published in eFlux, right? So there's overlap, but I just wanted to say that, this thing you said that left doesn't do, it's been my personal journey on Facebook and now Instagram stories, Facebook, that like begin somewhere where you have people agree with you and then move them more and more towards stuff. So there are individuals who do this. I don't know many of them, but left is also trying, right? If I'm allowed to call myself left still, so yeah, but like you just hit so many important points and so many important things. And you look, Mike Pepe, good friend from New York, man. Mike is amazing. Like all those people you name, it's like, I'm so glad to hear their name, their relevance.
Most fun to go to a bar with is Mike Pepe.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just wanted to like say, yeah, there's like overlap in like ideas and like a lot of the stuff that we do, but it's also like, I just wanted to add this and then go that like, we maintain this, you know what I mean? When we picked a name, we picked a very neutral name. It was part of this. If we call ourselves like the radical blah, 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 everybody would be like, okay, fuck it. But if you just call something like New Center for Research and Practice, it just sounds like, you know what I mean? White bread ready for anything, right? But then people will come in and then, so we still maintain this sort of like serious institutional interface, right? If you read our posts online, but we're really about jumpstarting more platforms, practices like you, because this is where it's at, really. So, but we have another job to do, and people like your collective and other groups have another job to do, right? Like Matthew Donovan and what they're doing with like his group in LA, you know what I mean? Like you guys can do all the radical stuff and all the crazy meme stuff. There's also like 2 things I wrote on triple ampersand that you might interesting, which is about basically mythopoetics and how left doesn't know how to do it. And we have to kind of like steal that from the right. So I don't know if you're interested. There's a 2-part thing I wrote back in 2018 on the concept that you elaborated very well. That's it. Thanks so much for this incredible presentation, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you for yours.
Do you want to comment anything, Margo and Abbey? Otherwise,
sorry, I was trying to be polite because it seems like someone put a question, and I was worried. It was
Yeah. We have Benjamin Allard on the line. There he is.
Hi, everyone. Yes, well, thank you very much for the presentation. I didn't know about Do Not Research. I looked at it. I think that's great. So I'm the institution in a way, or part of the institution. I'm with the Independent Media Arts Alliance, which is mostly an alliance of artist-run centers and small community organizations. And I'm working currently on a project of platform building. So that's the reason why this conference interested me. So we're talking about, very basic stuff in terms of digital capacity building, but I think that critical interrogation are still very important. And I think also that the place for artists and artist voice can also should also be considered. So I'm just curious about your perspective in terms of artist-run culture, in terms of possible ways of mutualizing. Do you see yourself as part of this artist-run culture? Do you have any tips or ideas in terms of platforms that you'd like to see, or knowledge base, as I see? So yeah, just pitching my project and seeing if you have any ideas, reflection, criticism. I'd love to hear you on that.
Margo,
Yeah,
Abbey?
I guess this is aimed at Margo and I. It's hard. I mean, we're like, I think in a lot of ways, looking to do something that's apart from both the DIY as DIY and also like direct action focused art collectives. And part of it is kind of like that we're based in a sort of institutional critique that there is like that institutions are good and you know, because we represent like a kind of margin doesn't mean that we don't want a kind of reinvestment in the existing ones, which is like a difficult line to walk. And especially I'm 23. I'm 23 years old and I like to hang out with my friends. And so like a lot of it was like so intuitive and so much to you know, my experience of the internet. Growing up, I played like World of Warcraft and I like had a guild, you know, so this is like that kind of digital formation is like not just something I want, but is also something I was like given. So I don't think I have an answer, but I think that kind of represents where we're coming from.
I think that's I think that's great. No, I absolutely understand that, and you know, maybe a guild in the World of Warcraft can also be a place for critical intervention, and yeah, and I see that someone else has their hand up. I will, you know, stay on the line for a little while, and yeah, I'd love to see how all of those projects evolve, and you might receive some an email from me at some point. I want to invite you to a Discord channel or something that we're building, but you're all very welcome to what we're building at IMA.
Thanks, Benjamin. If I may just offer like a transnational perspective, artist-run culture is very Canadian. Like we don't have that, as far as I know, in Brazil and Latin America or
Totally.
Totally, yeah. But Mohammed's much more Canadian than I could ever. Yeah, so, but that's an interesting conversation, I guess, when you compare different models across the globe. But yeah, thanks for the question and the answers. John Preston.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, I guess this is mostly targeted towards Margo and Abbey. I think there's a lot of like this new media and new culture is happening on these platforms like Facebook and Instagram and now TikTok. That's where these things are being created, but the platforms are very capitalist themselves. They're very centralized. They push this idea about us not owning our data. They're owned by like, you know, giant corporations. So what do you think, like, I guess you're kind of pushing this new approach of like trying to build new platforms and stuff. I guess, yeah, I'm just curious how do you navigate the inherent kind of tension there between trying to participate in a new culture and disseminate new ideas and be critical, but still existing on these platforms that have all of these problems.
Yeah.
Like in my own practice, I just said no. I got rid of Facebook and I've got Twitter and stuff, and I think that's perhaps too far in the opposite direction. You know, it stops you from being able to participate in the culture. So yeah, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean,
it's difficult.
I think. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I talk after.
Oh, okay. A quick plug for our friends at Trust. They wrote an essay called "Moving Castles," which I think is like going to be the best point of reference, even more than us. They have a similar kind of Discord-based community, and they're talking about kind of how do you keep the snorkel up on the main platforms while also kind of having the opportunity for closed critical discussion.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I guess, you know, there are like a lot of problems with working on these platforms, and especially social media platforms. There's the kind of content that's incentivized, which is largely, you know, silly or pornographic, and that's kind of inimical to any kind of like actually disruptive discourse or propaganda or whatever. In addition to that, there's also censorship, which a lot of our friends who run meme pages and put their art out online have been incredibly burdened with numerous times, you know, countless accounts banned and shadow banned and unable to put their work out there. You know, and that's one of the main challenges, I think, is that we can kind of keep together like a dark forest community, hold people together, kind of build deep conversations there. But in terms of reaching the mainstream, for now, at least, the main avenue is still, unfortunately, just the received modes of communication, which are, you know, social media. And I think that's one of the main difficulties that we kind of just exist in tension with. I don't know if we have like an actual solution yet, unfortunately. But I think by occupying this space, we're learning every day how to deal with that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I wanted to add to this the sort of like theoretical work of Ben Singleton on traps. And this is from way back 2014, 2015. And actually we were totally like building the news center, having Singleton's ideas in mind, that there's no trap that cannot be broken. The whole idea of setting up a trap comes with the risk the trap maker makes that this trap will be broken and people will escape from the trap, right? All these platforms you're talking about are different kinds of like trap for our attention, for our eyeball, for our money. You can always find a way to break out of them. If you want to start with like, oh my God, the world is this and these platforms are this and that, you really have to basically, through engagement, you find the fault lines, you find parts of the platform that can be exploited. And only through that you can basically forge a path outside of the trap. But if you just sit on your butt and say, oh, these things are run by capitalism, it's all finance capital, it's this, it's that, you won't be able to do anything. I mean, the chances of you not doing anything is much higher than trying to find the loopholes or the fault lines and the trap to break out of. And this has been our own experience. And also, you know, there's another thing here is that each one of these, you know what I mean? Each one of these media technologies that are emerge and become sort of like slowly popular, they have a expiry date in like before they become so perfect that you can't sort of like forge a way out of them. But thank God, there's always another platform, another paradigm arrives with its own vulnerabilities that capitalism want to take on, and you can easily just jump ship. So part of it is to like realize that you need to find the hole in the trap. The other thing is to just abandon the old trap for the new one, because the new one, you probably are more likely you're going to find the fault lines in the new one because it's new and have not been perfected, right? So basically, if you keep these two things in mind, I think you can easily sort of like just have your own core objectives and values and not too much worry about it corrupting you, and try to find those places where you can do what you need to do in that platform, having in mind all of its problems.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a very pragmatic way of looking at it. All right, thank you.
That's also consistent with accelerationism for the most part. I just want to second Laith in the chat pointed out a New Models and Josh Citarella, who we spoke a lot about. They did a podcast where they talk about light leaks, the phrase dark forest to refer to these like online communities occupying the space of a think tank. That comes from New Models, Carly Busta. So this is like who we're all in conversation with.
I want to add to what Mohammad said about kind of always, getting out of the trap. And I think one of the main questions we have when like looking at a lot of the like forces of reaction online, like the alt-right and the kind of groups that came after its sort of dispersion, is that we were wondering, like, are these groups like somehow something about their difference to the left, maybe their relationship to capitalism, like are they somehow like better able at propagandizing to people and at affecting people on these platforms? Or, on some level, do they have better strategy? Maybe their critical outlook somehow like permit them to try in a different way? Because I mean, I think like Mohammad was saying, these sort of right-wing groups were always able to just, get banned, shift to a different platform, find a different group of people to propagandize to. And of course, we've seen them have, devastating effectivity. And I think we can kind of take that as like a negative example of something potentially positive, where like, the right success at kind of working around a lot of like, a lot of the impositions, a lot of the censorship they faced, they were still able to, really like transform, like center right parties across the world, push them farther to the right, bring them like a very fervent youth base. And, we figure that it's at least worth trying to see if something is possible something like that is possible for the left as well.
It's also possible for artists too, and I think that's again where we kind of find our niche is like, you know, we talked about for whatever reason like bodybuilders, people who are looking like to stop using seed oils, whatever. These are things that are like have a present hold on the mainstream and like are part of the culture war, and they're also like incredibly like aesthetically punchy, you know, the idea of the bodybuilder who like doesn't want to eat seed oils because it's like ruining his body. And like, so there's like a kind of like aesthetic that's like popular, that's confirmed by its presence as a trendy thing. And then there's also the possibility for that to then become a politics about the body, you know, the kind of demand, you know, that there's no chemicals in the water that disrupt our like bodies, that could become like a politics of bodily autonomy. But right now it isn't. But it also has like an extreme presence visually, aesthetically in the culture war that could lend itself to an artwork. And that's maybe I would say better a different, you know, another time. But like it's a problem both of creative expression and it's also a problem to the left. A lot of the things that we're interested in that can be deterred, I guess.
I'd like to ask a question. Can I come in?
Yeah, go ahead, Paula.
Okay, great to hear about these two projects. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about publishing. You know, for example, I was looking at the News Center website and I couldn't find a link into a publishing idea or the definition of the way publishing articulates with this pedagogical or anti-pedagogical action. You know, and the same thing for, you know, in terms of if you could develop that a little bit. And also for do not research as well. I think that's interesting how the publishing, it seems there's a physical publication, right? As opposed to just digital, or if you want to talk about that, if you're publishing digitally or if it comes out.
We publish both. We publish both digitally and off digitally. The Deleuze book, the condition was for it to be digital because the Deleuze Foundation and family don't think this is a Deleuze book because it was shorthanded in the first series of seminars he taught as a professor. And then these French notes are in Deleuze archives. And then one of our early members and students sort of like translated the short notes into English and elaborated it into a book. So then that's why but there's easy and inexpensive ways of printing, especially in Europe. You can easily print books for very little money. In Poland, in Czech Republic, in Hungary, and, you know, to Berlin, they're very close, a train ride. They just put it on a train, you pick it up at a train station. I've printed 2 or 3 projects that way, all of them under 500 euro, 600 euro, and you get like 500 copies, 300 copies, right? And then it's a great way to send the material like physically around the world to people who purchase the books or pick a free copy, and basically to step outside of the internet. So, but if you're stuck on like printing things like in Canada or in US where things are, or in Germany where things are expensive, yeah, a small book can cost like 3,000 euro to print. But there's always ways to find cheap printers in Eastern Europe. You know, like I was in Bulgaria, and then they constantly are translating new books into Bulgarian and printing it on like newsprint books that feel like, you know, romance novels because they're so light, because printing on recycled newsprint is even cheaper if you want to go that route. So you can even print them for like less than 300 euro for like 500 copies, 300 copies.
No, but I was not asking for advice on how to print. I was just asking what was the role of publishing allied to what you're doing in terms of, you know,
the role of publishing for us, as I said earlier, is to sort of like actualize it out of the virtual. So basically becoming real, because we don't have buildings. We don't have brick and mortar. We are like online, right? So how do we establish ourselves is like basically the social media to me that we do daily. It's like you put the bricks of the institution, but then the bricks fall, and then every day you have to put more because you need to have this ongoing institution building online, right? So publishing becomes an instant in which you actually kind of like produce something real and physical. But I also think of like real conferences in person and all that as like kind of like publishing, because that's also does that, right? Whenever the News Center does collaboration with cool institutions and we do like something real world, we kind of become real all of a sudden. Like this spring, we did a bunch of interviews with curators and artists in Venice Biennale, and it was in person. And the videos are recorded live right in the ground of the Biennale. And some of the videos have been viewed a lot because those artists won awards. Like Ali Cherry won the Silver Lion, and all of a sudden ours was the only interview. Like, or the last Venice Biennale, we were the only people who interviewed the winning curatorial team of Lithuania. Who was it? Lithuania that did that like beautiful like beach. So our video got like super views because we actually cared about their work and interviewed them before they got the Golden Lion, right? So to me, publishing is to kind of like turn the virtual become actual. But I don't know if no research has done publishing or they want to like comment on it too. But yeah, to me, that's the main role of publishing for us. Amazing.
Yeah, so we did
Nice.
a print on demand version of a lot of the written works on our blog, but we do mostly publish, I guess, virtually. Most of it goes on our website. We have, an Instagram account that kind of turns the sort of scroll of the website into a series of things you can slide through to kind of disperse it to alert people. It's a kind of our form of like a newsletter. I think in addition to that, we also do, we do things with the visual arts. So in a sense, we kind of devirtualized, to use a word Jack kind of coined, in the form of our group show we had back in April. That's a kind of publishing. It's a way of making the work sort of physically available, something real, something off the screen. So those are, I think, two forms of what we did. And I think, again, I mean, the purpose of that is, the purpose of that is just to sort of allow these things to exist off the platforms maybe, and also to allow for maybe deeper engagement with them because they aren't on the platforms. They're not subordinate to the kind of feed in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I would want to say is that, like, why publish at all? Like, why is that important to a pedagogical project? And that's actually pretty, tied in to why we have Do Not Research in the first place, was we had been doing the book club, and we're this para institution. It feels as a classroom. You're working with artists and creatives, and I was like, can they put the pen to paper? Like, can they do their homework with what they learned? And so that was the place that it came out of, was like everyone responding to the texts and writing and making art about it. And that's like the same spirit it has today. Yeah.
Thanks.
I was also super curious about publishing strategies because maybe that's one of the dimensions of both projects that I managed to follow. But I think that we are coming to a close. If anyone has final questions, please ask them now. In the meantime, I'll lead with a more pragmatic one. If anyone wants to get involved with Do Not Research or with the New Center in any capacity, as a participant, as a student, as a professor, or the equivalent of it, what should they do?
I think for us, I would say stay tuned to our Instagram for the moment. So that's under Do Not Research, do period, not period research. You can find, that's kind of the main hub. Of course, like, we're all active on Instagram. This is kind of also a gesture where you can't leave the platforms. What you can do is kind of reinvest in each other and make sure that nobody's trying to do it alone. So Jack just, he did the thing I should have done, which is he linked it in the chat. And that's where I would say is just keep up with us there, and it's where we also post updates, not just the things from not just the posts from the blog.
Well, for the New Center, I just want to say that we're going to do the second edition of the Incredible Machines Conference, which I spoke about it in my talk that was predating New Center. The first edition was held in Vancouver, 2014, March. So I'm in the middle of like finalizing the parameters of the second edition of the conference, which is actually, interestingly enough, the main output of it will be a book, not the conference. The conference is just basically to open up the idea of like how to put together a publication. So if you are interested, I can maybe I can borrow the mailing list of Gabrielle to let you know when is it happening. It's going to be a kind of a private think tank where my guests are going to basically bring an idea and discuss it, and then but we're going to have outside audience only through registration and people who like really like, we want to know who's coming because we want this not to be public so people can talk a little bit freely. And the list of guests is very impressive. But I also like publicly want to invite Margo and Abbey to be on the presentation part of the conference, not just as the auditioning audience. So if you put your email here, I'll put you on the list of people who are getting invited to actually participate in both the conference and the book. So if you're interested, just think about it and put your email here. So at least, please, I can send you also the invite.
Yes, that's very kind.
Yes, for sure. You belong there because what we're discussing in the second edition really is a lot of it. You touching a lot of those nerves, and actually there's funding for it, so you get compensated for your whatever you produced for the book and the conference. So because it's actually, again, it's supported by Canada Council. So it's a major thing. It's been in the making. It was supposed to happen in early 2020, but pandemic kind of delayed it, and then finally it's taking place this October online. Oh, for the rest, if you want, please write to any of our emails. I guess the best one will be to write to Student Services at the New Center. I'm going to put it here. And then just mention you were in this seminar or conference, and then you will get a 3-month free membership to just test it and see how it is. And if you like it, you can then like basically become a member by using our ongoing special of whatever it is in the moment. But anyone here, if you write to Student Services at the New Center, I make sure you get a 3-month free account. We might forget to close it after 3 months. It might become 6 months.
That's a great deal. Better than
totally.
NordVPN. Oh, thanks so much, Mohammed. That's super generous.
It's generosity is like it's collective. Like everybody's generous. Like, you know what I mean? They're generous for actually giving their eyeballs and time to those seminars if they ever watch those videos. You know, it's like
That's indeed true. Well, yeah, we still have maybe time for one last question if anyone wants to jump in. I was really curious about these post-CCRU connections, but maybe that's too long for the time we have left.
I think we're all doing different versions of CCRU. Like somebody in London last month said, "Oh, I know you guys. New Center is the CCRU 2.0," and I was like, "I love that. I never thought about it that way." But I'm going to use that in our marketing or something. I'm kidding. We never do that kind of marketing. But like, yeah, but people think of us. I guess like no research is like CCRU 3.0, something like that.
Margo, did you?
Yeah, I don't really.
I mean, like the practical answer is that like the syllabus, Josh's syllabus, is like pulling from different CCRU figures. Like we read Sadie Plant, and I mean, I fully accept that I'm in the tradition of the CCRU. As a real CCRU head, I've read a lot of it to be kind of critical, which I won't go into now.
how can you not be critical? Nick Land was in CCRU, right? So it's like, you have to be critical.
Yeah, it's that guy, that crazy guy. There's so many great pictures of him like asleep in the audience. Like he's a very memeable figure, that guy, on top of being scary. CCRU, so CCRU was it was coming out of what school was CCRU?
Warwick.
Mohammad? Warwick. This was like a band of academics, including Mark Fisher, Sadie Plant, and others. Nick Land was also a part of it.
Nick and Sadie started it. Sadie freaked out and left, and then they closed it.
Yes.
So basically,
it was very short. And it's really like a kind of, the reason that people remember it is just it's like a really easy to kind of get a kind of pantheon of these accelerationists really fast. But the fact of CCRU, they didn't really produce that much. There's there's like a book that has a really great cover by them that we were definitely thinking about when we published our book.
the pneumogram on the cover, you know that pneumogram thing? Yeah, God.
Yeah, no, we were thinking of it. It was like, how close can we get without doing it? Yeah, this is ours, so it's green.
Yeah,
it's got the
green
year
and the
on
black
it.
is the right colors, right? You use the right colors.
Yes.
You know, what's great about CCRU is actually the mythology around it, not the actual text they produced, which some of it is great, the mythology and then the vocabulary, but not just vocabulary, but a method to produce new words. So this is really the three important legacies of them, right? The myth of CCRU, like basically how to create new mythologies in a time of atheism and secularism. How can you basically like hyperstition, right? And then these words they created, but also the blueprint they gave us of how you can easily chop words and put two things together and create new concept and just throw them into culture. This is what, to me, is the greatest strength of what the CCRU legacy.
It was a generative mention. Anyway, dear guests, any final words for us today? Margo, Abbey, Mohammad?
Yeah, well, this is another thing I was going to say. Like another thing we were planning to do the year that pandemic hit was New Center was going to host something called the Trial of Nick Land, and we were going to actually have a trial for Nick Land and have like a defendant for him, and then a prosecution team, and then like a jury team, and the whole thing. But like that pandemic just has put that plan in different. And then I was in conversation with Land, and he was initially he was interested because he thought it's a great way, but then pandemic happened and then everything is on hold. But my dream is to actually have a objective but also performative and mythological forum where we can just pretend it's an actual court, and we can basically put Land on trial and kind of like assess his legacy and see what he's done, and does he belong to like jail or execution, or he can be like given a light sentence or whatever, right?
I'm very supportive of this idea, and you should make a new newsletter exclusively for
we should
whether or not that happens.
I'm very interested in rethinking it with you, and maybe we can kind of like we can do it, the Trial of Nick Land. I mean, you call an event Trial of Nick Land, you're gonna have thousands of people coming to it just to see like what's going on, right?
I'm imagining like you need a Coliseum, right? You really need a Coliseum.
You know, the idea is that the prosecutor is this friend of mine, this woman I know, she's incredible. Corina Patelis. She was the deputy minister of communication for Syriza government, and her brother was the assistant to Ben Bernanke, the head of Federal Reserve, and he's the economic advisor to the right-wing prime minister of Greece right now. So she comes from a political family in Greece, and her mother is the most important female, a Greek philosopher who actually was teaching at Warwick. She was part of the team that hired Land. And then Corina was just going into philosophy school first year, and basically studied first and second year philosophy with land. And she has a lot of dirt and interesting stuff from that early Warwick years with when Lan and Sadie came to Warwick, right? And I thought she would be great for the head of the prosecution team because she is also like a politician and she worked with Syriza in Greece. So she also said, I would love to do it. And so we had the prosecution, everything, but like, maybe we can rethink it together. Seriously, it's a project I really want to do.
That's very, very funny. I would love to keep hearing about it. I need to head out, but thank you so much, Gabriel. And
So
everyone
I
who
get your
came.
email from Gabriel, right? And for further sort of like stuff.
Sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, perfectly. I can do that. Most definitely. Margo and Abbey, any final words or not? That's it.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. This is great.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks you all. That was really lively. That was the most lively Zoom chat I've seen in many months. So yeah.
That's what
tune
we
in
bring.
next week for
That's what
more Museum Without Walls things, people. We have some videos right now on our YouTube channel. Maybe I should just post it to the chat as well. And we'll be discussing them next week at the same time, 2 p.m. EST Thursdays. Yeah, and thanks so much, our guests and everyone. A round of applause to all of you. Yeah, that was amazing.
Awesome. Thank you. See
Thank
you.
you.